One penny back on your terms. Powered by Sterling Bank.
Good morning, Lagos, and thank you for staying with us. You're listening to Smooth 98.1, Smooth Breakfast with me, Valentine.
And Fola, good morning.
Good morning, and joining us at this time for Freshly Pressed 981, we have the one and only Adenike Oyetunde. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good
Ha-
morning, Fola. Good morning, Valentine.
Good morning, Adenike. Adenike Oyetunde is her handle on Twitter, and we have the man who is back from his sojourn, Nnamdi. Good morning.
Back like I never left.
Real
Welcome,
surgeon.
ladies.
Welcome. Nnamdi AK is at Nnamdi AK on Twitter. And Ugo Dre, thank you so much for staying back after Business Express.
Like me.
Yo, not welcome. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning. Lagos, join the conversation this morning by sending messages through WhatsApp. Now, that number is 0809 444 0981. For your WhatsApp messages, 0809 444 0981.
You can also tweet at Smooth981FM. Hashtag is FreshlyPressed981.
And we're streaming live on YouTube, so feel free to subscribe, join us, and leave a comment.
Absolutely. All right, let's go through the stories. We have the very first one from the Punch newspaper this morning. The Islamic movement in Nigeria, otherwise known as the Shiite group, will today file a suit at the Federal High Court in Abuja to challenge its proscription by the federal government. So the senior advocate of Nigeria who's representing them or defending the group's leader, Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, that's Mr. Femi Falana, and many of his followers, who's defending Ibrahim El-Zakzaki and many of his followers in court since 2016, has confirmed to newsmen that they will be going to court to challenge that proscription. So I'm giving this to Nnamdi.
Right, so first of all, being myself a lawyer on the one hand, and on the other hand, I have to say, I haven't actually read what was published in the papers. I think 2 days after the court order was given on Friday. So I'm not so sure how far I want to go in commenting on the proscription of IMN itself, because even at this point I can't tell for sure whether it was the Islamic movement in Nigeria, which is an actual association, or if it was the entire Shiite sect
so it's just
of the
Islamic.
religion.
It's just
It was just IMN.
Yeah.
However, when I was reading, in preparation to tackle this story, I did read at some point that the ex parte order obtained in court referenced Shiites and banned association with Shiites. So as I'm saying, I'm a little unclear on the nature of the prescription ban itself. But what this story is trying to tell us is that Femi Falana SAN, who has been counsel to El-Zakzaki for a little while, that's the group's leader, IMN's leader, has indicated that he has instruction to file suit challenging the order. What that the nature that will take is again also unclear to me, because if you obtain an ex parte order, right, just to clear up a little bit of the legality, an ex parte order in court cannot stand alone. It has to come pursuant to an actual suit. So a suit must have been filed. And then you obtain an order ex parte, which means in the absence of the other party, right? As opposed to what is usual in our adversarial system of litigation, where both sides have to have a chance to be heard. So when you obtain an ex parte order, for whatever reason, verging on urgency, or as in this case now, there was a death, and the court's trying to protect certain rights, you can get an order in the absence of the other party, right? Okay. Which will expire at such time as the other party can show up in court. So I'm not sure if this story has been properly reported in saying that they want to file a suit to challenge it because they already have that right. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Yes. You already have that right. Once you get an ex parte order, you have to then put the other party on notice to come and defend whatever motion it is you made for the order sought. And the ex parte order is supposed to be temporary, expiring after a particular time.
Well,
Nonetheless, yeah.
according to the human rights lawyer Femi Falana, he said that he got word from the leaders, those who representing the Islamic movement on Nigeria, that they said they asked him to go forward with filing the suit today, and in defiance to that suit being filed today, they suspended every protest that they've been embarking on to call for the release of El Zakzaki.
Yeah, so it was the IMN spokesman, Ibrahim Musa, who made that particular statement, which is another reason why I'm being careful not to pass too much comment, because Femi Falana himself doesn't seem to have, at least according to this story, made any statements of his own. Nonetheless, the important thing is that something will be filed in court today, and thereafter we'll know exactly what the picture is with this particular case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nnamdi. Moving on, Adenike, I'm coming to you with this one, and this is from Borno State. So the Premium Times has reported that the Borno State Governor, Babagana Zulum, has suspended a medical director and 4 resident doctors who were not at their duty post the night he decided to pay a surprise visit, to some public hospitals in Maiduguri. And of course, the affected doctors were not present. The nurses reportedly tried calling some of the doctors, but none of them picked their calls or showed up until the governor left the hospital.
Okay,
Let me
so
help you. They're watching Big Brother.
No.
you have to plug
You
that
didn't-
in.
You didn't say that.
Ugo Dre. Okay, so apart from what Ugo said,
Yeah.
at that time of the night, are they getting some things done during Big Brother? Because I'm wondering.
It's
What?
Okay.
Okay.
They are doctors. They are
So-
on call.
Very quick one, Amanda.
Moving on.
Okay.
I feel very strongly that we all know as adults, this is not the first time we're hearing a governor is paying an unplanned visit to whatever department of his, and in this instance, is a hospital. There was a time in the news that a governor paid a visit, and we saw the picture circulating where the civil servants started to kneel because they were begging. He had said they should turn them back, and a lot of us talked about it and condemned that particular act. See, the affected doctors were not present when the governor visited, and I feel like one of the things that probably precipitated this action was according to the report, they say that rumors had been circulating that patients were left unattended all through the night, and most of these doctors would rather face their private practice. And we know that this is the reality. Maybe not for a lot of doctors, but a lot of people would rather their private practice than the government work.
But could it also be that because we hear this a lot with government doctors, that they would rather be at their private practice? Could it be that we've said this so much that we just assume that's always the case? Could it be
Some of
that
them,
they're
I agree.
overworked and they're just tired?
I agree with you that without a doubt we do not have enough doctors.
Okay.
And that's one reality that we have to also look at. What if these doctors are overworked and are simply doing what, sleeping? Of how many doctors that were suspended, about 4 of them were suspended, and now the medical director also had to go on suspension as well.
Because he was supposed to be
The
in
reality
charge.
is, if they do their findings, they probably will find some of them were just sleeping at home or sleeping somewhere, just trying to rest and get some peace. And that's a conversation that we have to genuinely look at. But nonetheless, the question that bothers me is if, as adults, we always have to be monitored. And I remember that sometime here I talked about how buses were no longer parking at the bus stop. We had to take officials of LASMA to stand at the bus stop and insist that the buses had to move to the earmarked spaces. And this is what also, that story reminds me of.
But doctors,
now-
bus drivers.
No, why I'm saying
like,
that is because it feels like we have to be monitored. And if they have to be monitored by the governor, and this is one incident, the governor is not going to go back there the next day.
No.
Even if everybody's going to be on their toes in the next 1 month. What happens in 2 months? So the government has to find a sustainable means or strategy in ensuring that everybody's working. Like you mentioned, some people are literally just burnt out. And if we fail to take into account that doctors are burnt out, we'll continue to deceive ourselves and say, oh, let's by the time we suspend everybody, it's the governor that will show up at the hospital to care for the patients. So I feel sad for the medical director, but unfortunately, because he could not give cogent reasons why these doctors
his
were
staff
absent,
not around.
knowing full well that the number of them were reached, including the ones that were first responders. Yeah, they were reached and no one picked. So yeah, that's the story.
That's really sad. All right, I'm coming back to Nnamdi with this story from Thisday that says Buhari will deploy technology, overhaul security architecture to stem crime. The president unfolded a two-pronged approach to stem the spike in cases of kidnapping, killing, and banditry that have worsened the security situation in the country. I hear about, oh, I hear drones and CCTV cameras and things like that happening here.
I
What do
mean,
you think?
listen, it's 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 quite a scary story, right?
Why?
It is scary.
In my opinion,
I
it's a
thought we're
scary
supposed to be
story.
relieved.
Right. So, from the little I know about history, I don't claim to be the historian in this room. If there is anybody else who knows more than me, please jump in. But what I do remember about every authoritarian government that has sprung up over the years is increased surveillance, right? And the word monitoring pops up in this story over and over and over again. Let's take it from the beginning. Apparently, President Buhari has stated that closed circuit television, that's CCTV, which is ubiquitous in a city like London, for instance, and the use of drone technology will be introduced to policing in Nigeria. The idea being that there are lots of elements, radical elements, criminal elements in our society that need to be monitored more closely, and needs to be studied for their activities in order to better protect people from the outcomes of their plotting and their secret gatherings, I suppose. All of this has come in the aftermath of the Shiite protest that spilled into violent
Not
action
just that
and the loss of a
insurgency
DCP.
and all that.
Insurgency
The
in
banditry.
the northeast, banditry and herdsmen action. I mean, just generally the insecurity levels in Nigeria appear by some measures to be at an all-time low. So the government has decided that, you know what, I guess this is a preventative measure, right? Instead of constantly having to respond and being on the back foot, instead of constantly reacting, we're going to take preventative action. However, anybody who's seen the epic Netflix series Black Mirror knows what happens when you weaponize drones, for instance. When you put people, you're creating, or I can see the beginnings of a police state. And anything we know about this particular regime and the way it's gone about things suggests that they will go the whole hog. However, and this is funny, it's cold comfort, but knowing how things are in Nigeria, where we can't even get street lights to work, I'm quite curious to see how we're going to monitor our people with
I think
drones and
I'm going to ask you this question
advanced
because
tech.
if we look at, you already have mentioned how precarious the situation is when it comes to security. Buhari did say that they're going to equip the police force. Are you saying that we really do not need to equip our police force, but rather try and work on our security defenses in a different way?
So further down in this story, because at some point it segues into a statement by his spokesman responding to an address by traditional rulers.
Yes.
You can see the kernel of perhaps a more a solution that has more utility. So he's talking to the traditional rulers about how there needs to be a little bit more of a community link to maintaining security.
Because information gathering is very useful.
Very, very useful. And apart from that, just generally, it's easy and has been proven all over the world to secure people when that act of securing comes from within the
local
community.
community.
Do you understand? Which is
Yes.
why a lot of people have been talking about the need for state policing, right? I don't want to push any agendas on this program, but I do think that there is some wisdom to deciding to diffuse the security system instead of centralizing everything. Anyway, just to wrap up, the story does go on to continue to speak about monitoring, and I'm just thinking about how the whole world is rocked by the Cambridge Analytica scandal from years ago, and how there's a movie out. I can't remember what it's called, but
The
it's
Hack.
supposed to be The Hack. There you go. I want to watch it tonight. Anyway, so the world is moving in that direction. Privacy, data protection. Nigeria seems to be moving towards it That's scary. It goes on. So sorry, Valentine. I see your hand movement, but it talks on later on about gridlock in Apapa, which I think is also somehow linked into insecurity in the way that it turns out. But presidency had issued an order on May 22 to decongest Apapa. It hasn't happened. They're lamenting it, and on like
We're
that.
still here. Let's take messages. Very quick one. Timothy says, "What is wrong with what is wrong is wrong. If you were an emergency service provider and arrived at a hospital, would you allow? If you're in an emergency and you arrived at a hospital, would you allow your excuse hold? If they are
If they are
overworked, the association and unions should have been involved with this and registered a key trademark dispute." Benga Komu says, "Should the contractors handling the Lagos-Ibadan expressway and the government not improve the alternative roads to the expressway before closing the road? And to close the road for 4 months is preposterous. How can anyone do that?" We're not looking at the story there today, but thank you for your message, Benga.
All right, I'll go to Adenike again before Valentine comes to Nnamdi, and this is from the Punch. So, a West African Exams Council official, that's a WAEC official, Oshidende Adewumi, on Wednesday. All right. Let me just go on with the story. Whoever is taking it should go ahead and do that.
Measles outbreak claims 100 in Borno, Yobe. That's from you, Telegraph. Nnamdi, your thoughts on this story, please.
Sad story, man. I feel like I'm monopolizing the mic a little bit, but this one is a big deal. Apparently, there have been no fewer than 21,000 cases and counting of measles, with about 100 deaths in the past few months in the northeast. This is the area of Nigeria which has been made vulnerable by persistent insurgency attacks, Boko Haram, and similar such organizations. And as a result, a lot of those communities have become trapped. They no longer have access to healthcare. And in the situation where they've needed to be vaccinated or to be treated with urgency, they haven't been, resulting in something of, I think at this point, I don't know what the measurement is, how you measure what becomes an epidemic, but this sounds to me like an epidemic. And it's actually quite interesting, because I know that in the United States at this point, there's some states in the United States experiencing the worst measles outbreak for several years, even though in the States it's mostly been attributed to rising anti-vaxxer movement, where some people believe that vaccinations are bad for their kids. Nonetheless, anyway,
So sensitization would have been the right way to plug that gap.
No. I think in Nigeria, it's actually just it's occurred because of internally displaced people being unable to get access to healthcare.
Yeah.
But one would expect that they would have the right provision based on the fact that there are certain agencies that are responsible for taking care of them. Some of them funded by the government.
They're not even able to get them enough food,
What about
clean water.
beyond people in IDP camps, people in conflict areas, where even for the officials who are going to provide vaccination to get to them, it could be a security risk.
I mean, there's definitely that point. Just to round up, this story is mostly sourced from Dr. Sule Mele, who's the director of the Borno State Primary Healthcare Development Agency, and he said that they've been able to conduct reactive vaccination. So that's okay. Owing to the measles outbreak, they've been able to go back and try to step up their efforts. But
thank you very much, Nnamdi. Let's move on from health to education now, to Adenike. I didn't sign Buhari's Cambridge certificates. A WAEC official who took the stand says from the Punch newspaper. Please take us through the story. I wonder why you're laughing. This is a funny story.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because I've not.
Your president went through and got 5 credits. You should be proud.
Oh yeah, what's it called? Oshida Adewumi denied signing the Cambridge University moderated examination certificates that was produced by President Muhammadu Buhari.
Yes.
And this was also tendered as evidence before the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal. Now, the documents, of course, have been admitted as exhibits, and they were his statement of result as well as the broadsheet for the results of 18 candidates, of which Buhari was one of them. So Adewumi is the WAEC's deputy registrar, school examinations in Nigeria, appeared before the tribunal, having been subpoenaed to the tribunal at the instance of Buhari, and he confirmed yesterday that he certified that the Cambridge University documents were actually authentic and certified, but admitted that they were not signed by WAEC.
How do you certify something without? Okay, you can't certify something without signing. Necessary.
Yeah. He testified as, like I mentioned, Buhari's fourth defense witness. And if you just, for those who do not know or are new in town, that's because Atiku Abubakar is challenging President Buhari's victory in the February 23rd poll. Now, part of the grounds of the petition we know is seeking to nullify the victory, that the president lacked the educational qualification to contest the polls. And Buhari's chief of staff also did testify and said that he personally signed for and collected the Cambridge University documents on July 18, 2019. However, the petitioners contended that Kyari collected the documents months after they filed their petition. And it's been back and forth. But the lawyer, the APC lawyer, said he had been working with WAEC for about 30 years and confirmed that the examination was conducted by Cambridge University in conjunction with WAEC, and also confirmed the three people, but also stated emphatically that this certificate was not signed. And in law, how do your signature means a whole lot.
Yes,
as a body.
How you hold a certificate that has no signature?
Valentine was trying to make a point earlier, as can it be certified and not signed? There's so much that we need to look at when it comes to our laws, and some people, like myself, have misplaced original documents, and then when you go back, they give you certified true copies, as the case may be. But in this instance, they are now claiming that it wasn't signed, and the question is, so where did the certificate originate from? And the court is going to have to answer what the viability of that document is, because if satisfactorily can be proven that it wasn't signed, then it means it's not tenable, and even though admitted in evidence, it doesn't hold so much water. So long story short, Buhari does not know
You shut your mouth to say that. Adenike, Ugo Dre, please, I'll come very quickly to you from this story for this story on Premium Times. Senate seeks return to January-December budget cycle, seeking to get us back into the normal way of life. They are hoping that the 2020 budget should be submitted by September. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good thing to hope, but whether it's possible, that's a different thing entirely. The government, the Senate is saying they want the government to submit budget by September, whereas you still don't have ministers in their portfolio. So they basically just finished the screening. So we don't even know what minister is going to handle what portfolio.
And this is what, 1st of August?
Yeah, this is 1st of August. So the ministers need to take office, and assume office, and then
settle down.
We meet with their farm sex, go through budget notes and all. So that takes time. And even when I think it was sometime in 2017 or thereabout, budget was presented in November, and then it typically takes the National Assembly 4 to 5 months to pass this budget, and it was passed I think in April or May of 2018. Same thing happened last year.
And then there's this back and forth in the House.
December, it was passed in May. So the National Assembly also has their own lead time, so probably 3 to 4 months on an average. So I doubt that budget can be ready in September, right? And so even if they work really hard, you work seriously, and the budget is out maybe in October, it still takes a National Assembly time to pass the budget. And this is a new National Assembly, so you're pretty sure that a lot of the drama and entertainment that we have out of the budget sessions will happen. So it's a lofty projection, but I don't think it's going to happen.
You don't think so? Anyway, we have a message from Chikagina on WhatsApp. Chikag says, I'm sad this morning that the president of the most populous black nation on earth is hiring the services of SANs, SANs, and lawyers to defend his WAEC certificates. Leaders across the world are discussing nanotechnology, electric cars, and
Speaking English.
President is defending...
They took him to court, so he's only responding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Ada says, thank you, Adenike, for that clarity. Ifoma, actually from Ikoyi, says, isn't this a case of fake news? If UMB has a certificate from the hallowed Cambridge, can't Cambridge confirm it? Okay, let's move on to this next story. Climate change. Ugo, I'll stick with you for this story from New Telegraph. Climate change Ayade, that's the Cross River State Governor, Professor Ben Ayade, yesterday canvassed for tree planting as a measure to tackle the problem of climate change in the state. And he has invested 100 million naira into this program.
The interesting thing about this story was that all I just kept seeing here was the money that was invested, 100 million. 100
You couldn't
million,
look
I'll
away.
make 50, I'll give 5 million, I'll give this. Just money, but nothing clear about how many trees,
Yeah.
you know.
Now
There's a
planted.
policy for
Yeah,
planting trees.
they plan to, you know, to plant trees. They plan to plant. And I was 2 days ago. I read an article where Ethiopia,
Yes.
by the way, you
Planted
know,
1 million
yeah,
trees.
1 million.
350 million. My
trees,
goodness.
12 hours.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that they actually went on holiday to do this.
Mm.
And it was also voluntary. So here you have a governor who is saying, look, everybody just go home, go and enjoy, have a holiday.
Mm.
And
Go
expect
to
them to
plant
come out and plant tree.
Mhm.
What kind of holiday is that? And then, of course, I don't know how many trees you want, how many trees you're targeting, except maybe the article didn't really cover it well. But
Mm.
all I can see here is just the money, you're
Money.
about to spend. Just know that there's
But my
money
question
about to
is,
spend
um,
on tree planting.
why is, please don't come at me for this, why is that a priority for a state that he claims has 58% of the forest in Nigeria?
Well, I don't know. He wants to make it a green state.
Yeah.
For all I care,
I mean-
mine is that look, you plant tree, that's not a problem. But how many trees do you want to plant? And
What
and,
is the
yeah,
plan?
and what's the objective of it? And then why do you have to declare public
climate
holiday?
change.
Yeah, and what's the big
Climate
deal?
change.
Actually, the ecological balance in Calabar
Mm.
and in Cross River as a
Mm.
whole has been greatly damaged in the last 4 years.
Okay, so they want
Incidentally,
to-
under this particular regime,
Oh.
and maybe now they're trying to save face, making this announcement. Maybe they're
And
just,
spending 100 million.
you know.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Let's move to this next one. Adenike, boat accidents claims 15 lives in Niger State. Sad incident. It was reported by the medical body. But your thoughts on this?
Okay, I feel like okay, let me read what the content is. It's reported by Punch, and the claim is that the accident might have been as a result of poor visibility due to bad weather, which caused the boat to run into a tree stump.
Mm.
And of course, bodies have been recovered.
Yeah.
But it's worrisome, especially in a state like Lagos, where we're asking the government to put almost a lot more resources into water transportation.
Mhm.
And the question then becomes, at what point do we know when not to go on water? How much education are they putting out there? Not just to the drivers of the boats, but also to riders. Because
Yes.
sometimes it's even the riders that are insisting. You see, they cancel flights and people are telling you, see, we can't see, and people are fighting. I don't get, do you want to come and go and die? If you want to go and, do you get? So it makes many questions. How much education is the government putting out? It's sad that lives have been lost, and I pray that their families are comforted through the loss. But the reality is, if we continue to pay the things that we do the way we are, we'll get more deaths.
Thank you, Adenike, for that very apt analysis on that. Ugo, please touch on this story from Thisday newspaper. NDIC banks losses to fraud jumped to 15.15%. They blame it on ATM fraud and different aspects. Please take us through the story.
Yeah, so if you're listening, be careful. Fraud cases are not reducing; they're rising. Check your bank account all the time. Because you never really know. And they're saying here that a lot of techniques that they're using now is hacking, cybercrime, IT-related products. So it's on an increase. But what worries me here is actually the staff that are involved. That's the bank staff that are involved. And according to this report, about 48% of the bank staff were actually contract staffs. So, and they're also saying that contract staff related fraud is on an increase, and banks rely a lot on contract staff, so that they can reduce costs,
Exactly.
and to be more efficient. And these are usually the front line people you see, maybe the tellers or in most banks. So, but then fraud related cases from these guys are actually on an increase, and it's actually worrisome. And I guess this is something that the CBN might also be looking at and saying, look, what can we do to reduce this? And then even lower level staff as well, fraud related cases around there is actually very high as well. So that's a bit of worry here. But if it's fraud will always happen in banks. Anywhere there's money, people would always want to take some. But what's very important is keeping it very low, and 15 billion is quite high.
And vigilance on the part of citizens. A quick message here before we wrap up. Emeka here sent in a message on WhatsApp. Says governor's unexpected visit reminds me of civil servants 7 from the comfort of their private businesses. Come in the morning, signs register, and disappears.
Ghost workers.
Special thanks to you, Adenike Oyetunde on Twitter. That's her handle. Please feel free to continue the conversation with her there. And Nnamdi Eke, welcome back, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Hey.
And special thanks to you, Ugo Dre. Big thank you for staying all through.
Breakfast on you.
Huh? No.
Yeah.
Next, we discuss entertainment in the grapevine. Stay with us. Say, I give you turned off your mic so you must go.